Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We have a little bit of an update with Tantalus Systems, which trades on the TSX under the ticker GRID. As many of you probably know, they reported this week and had an earnings call yesterday. So this session's really just going to be a bit of an update. We'll talk about the quarter a little bit. We'll talk about TRUSense Gateway, as well as maybe just provide a little bit of background on Tantalus and some of the other products for those that might be newer to the story. As always, the presentation will contain forward-looking statements. If you'd like to know more about those, you can find them on the company website on the presentation. And there will be a Q&A section, so feel free to put your questions in the box at the bottom. And I think it'll be mostly an informal session, so feel free to input questions whenever you like. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Peter Londa, CEO. Hi, Pete. How are you doing?
I'm great, Deb. How are you?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to Easter. It's been a long week. I'm sure you could relate to that.
It's been a long month. But happy to be here. Beats the alternative.
An exciting month too. I mean, so much has changed for the company in the last little while. Why don't you give us a little bit of an update and
absolutely
start just some questions.
And we welcome them. We were pleased to share earnings updates yesterday, and for those that may have joined us or seen our press release, I won't spend too much time on them, but a few highlights just to call out and to remind everybody who we are. So Tantalus is a technology company. We have a very specific purpose, and that purpose is to help electric utilities modernize their distribution grid. We can dive further into what modernizing the distribution grid looks like momentarily, but at the core of what we do is we are helping utilities harness the power of data from devices that we deploy on their behalf through their distribution grid from the substation all the way down to the meter and now soon behind the meter, and take that data and understand what's actually happening, where they have to make upgrades, where they have existing infrastructure like transformers that are stressed, about to fail, could lead to an outage or fire, where they have power lines that have been damaged by trees or squirrels or storms. And incremental to all of that, how do we help the utilities prepare for a big winter storm, extreme heat during the summer, and have granular control of the consumption side of power, not just the supply and delivery side. So that's what we do. That's our purpose, is helping utilities really modernize the delivery of electricity. To that end, our user community grew to 288 utilities as of December 31st. We'll look forward to providing an update on continued progress that we've made in building our user community in several weeks as we announce Q1 results for 2024. In terms of some highlights on the financial side, really pleased to hit a milestone in terms of total revenue. You may recall that we report in US dollars. So sorry, this is not converted into Canadian dollars for you. But last year, we delivered just over $42 million US dollars of revenue. That's an all-time high for the company. And a few great statistics that were similarly all-time highs. 35% of our total revenue came from software and services. That's the first time that's ever happened. Of that 35%, 24% of total revenue was from recurring revenue. And so you'll see in the next box, it is a big area of focus. Our recurring revenue is growing at a compounded annual growth rate of about 20% per year right now. And going into this calendar year, we shared that our sort of forward-looking 12-month recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue, is at $11.5 million, all-time high for the company. Last but not least, we delivered 52% gross profit margin. It's the highest we've ever generated in a calendar year. And achieving more than 50% gross profit margin has been a longstanding objective for our management team and our business. From our perspective, at that level, as we continue to scale and grow revenue through the TRUSense Gateway and other initiatives that we have underway, it provides us with real opportunity to drive operating leverage and improve the overall profitability and balance sheet of the company. So a couple of great milestones, Deb, that we were excited to achieve. I don't know if there are any questions that we want to talk about on the financial side, or I can just keep rolling and kind of talk about what we do, the products, and where we think the company goes with the TRUSense Gateway.
I don't see any questions, so maybe just keep going, Pete.
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna fast forward a few slides here to kind of get to the point of, so what do we actually do? The notion of modernizing the grid is not unique to Tantalus. It's an initiative that is underway in Canada, in the United States, and in other portions of the world. The way we define modernization aligns to the Department of Energy's definition of modernization here in the United States. And I reference here in the United States, we are headquartered obviously just outside of Vancouver, but our customer base is really in the US. That's the market we're focused on to drive revenue. And within that, there are kind of 6 big buzzwords highlighted in blue here. And I'd say our solutions existing that drove $42 million of revenue in 2023, and our solutions that are coming, the TRUSense Gateway and advancements with TRUSync grid data management software, formerly the Congruitive software that we acquired, right? They hit all 6 of these key items. So whether utilities are trying to improve their resiliency for Mother Nature, increasing number of storms that really damage infrastructure, we can help them address that. We do a lot around cybersecurity. We're not really focused on physical security of assets, but how do we help utilities access data and do that in a very secure way? We're trying to help utilities be flexible, right? What we do as consumers is changing daily. As people buy an electric vehicle at some point over the next 5 or 10 years, how does the decision the utility makes today from an infrastructure perspective allow them to support as folks migrate over time? And it will migrate to EVs. It's going to happen. It's just a function of at what pace and when. So in order to support 5, 10, and 15 years from now, utilities are making decisions today. Affordability is another big component of what we're focused on. As we've seen economic divide unfold in Canada and the United States, utilities are on the front lines of trying to make sure there is equitable access that is affordable to everybody in Canada, the US, other places in the world, regardless of economic circumstances. So that's another big area. And then last but not least, everyone's trying to reduce carbon footprint. And our recent announcements with Savant and the very exciting one a few weeks ago with GE Appliances are examples of how we are integrating new technology that consumers are purchasing that can ultimately not only reduce an individual's footprint, but also more importantly, in an aggregate level, help utilities reduce their carbon footprint. So there's a big component to that as well. At the core of what we do, 2 words: interoperable data. In order to deliver interoperable data to help utilities make better decisions, right, they need a comprehensive platform. And so there are components to our solution, the components to our capabilities, and what we refer to as a grid modernization platform, devices. We've been selling smart devices for 2 decades, a lot of experience there and a lot of know-how. The next wave of devices is something called the TRUSense Gateway, and we'll dive more into that. But it's how do we get devices in the field that are accessing data for utilities to make decisions? And so from devices, we roll out communications networks for utilities. We leverage cellular. We leverage radio frequency or RF. We leverage fiber connections, right? All different types of technologies, communications technologies to get data from source device back to utility and vice versa. With our acquisition of Congruitive, how do we make that data accessible to every department in the utility? And that we now refer to that as our TRUSync grid data management software. On top of that grid data management software software capabilities, we have a series of applications that address specific use cases within the utility. And then the holy grail for us is, as we have data that is interoperable, coming from field devices, through a communications network behind the firewall and into the utility, how do we drive data analytics with machine learning? And so an example of that, we recently launched our transformer analytics capabilities. That's taking data from existing devices in the field, running that through an analytics engine, using some machine-to-machine learning, and helping utilities pinpoint where do they have a pole top transformer or a distribution transformer that is malfunctioning, that is not sized properly, that is at risk of failing, and from failure, is it at risk of blowing up and leading to a fire, and mitigating wildfire risk for utilities. So this is a platform. It includes devices, networking, software, and analytics. Some portions of this platform can be sold independently. So utility doesn't have to buy every single aspect of our platform. Utilities can just buy our software layer, our grid data management system. And we saw that unfold with PG&E, one of the largest utilities in the United States, opted into a commercial license, the first one that we've sold in June of 2023. And we're seeing other large investor-owned utilities start to pay attention to what we're doing with PG&E. So there are scenarios where we may just sell software. There are scenarios where we may just sell analytics. But in terms of the real focus of the company, it's how do we sell a platform that's made up of these components to each utility. Embedded in that, and I'm just going to build this out really quickly. So where we're focused, the $42 million of revenue that we generated last year, it all came from the left side of this slide. Stuff that we do, devices, networking, software, and some formation of analytics from the substation to the meter. And that continues to scale. It continues to grow. We continue to add utilities that are selecting Tantalus to modernize from the substation to the meter. Where we've gotten a lot of attention and where we've been investing heavily and providing updates along the way is the TRUSense Gateway, which is this device in the middle. And the reason why this device is so important, not only for Tantalus, but the broader utility industry, is we have a first mover advantage to help the utility achieve a unique and new set of use cases at the meter socket, meaning at the electric meter. It doesn't require replacing the meter. And that's a very differentiated approach that we're taking. The items on the right-hand side, announcements with GE Appliances. This is their new flex capacity electric water heater. This is one of their new energy efficient HVAC systems. And Savant, another partner, right? Inverters for rooftop solar installations, power walls, EV chargers. And what's not yet pictured on this is smart electric breakers. And what the TRUSense Gateway does is it does a lot of things to the left-hand side and enhances value of what we already do today. Captures power quality data, and from that drives our analytics tool for transformer monitoring that much more effectively. But where we see significant opportunity to really change the complexion for the industry, and certainly for Tantalus, is in a very secure, from a cyber perspective, and very reliable from a communications perspective, is get to appliances behind the meter in conjunction with GE Appliances and Savant, and that ecosystem of partners will grow over time, but really help utilities go appliance by appliance of granular control in the event of an emergency. So I'll pause and give an example, Deb. The use case is with GE Appliances, through our TRUSense Gateway, and a utility giving away potentially a free new electric water heater to a homeowner, someone renting, a landlord. We can send a signal from the utility to that water heater. And if the utility is preparing for a storm, I live in Connecticut. My office is here in Connecticut. This winter, I think I've had 6 announcements or text messages from the utility that delivers power to my office and home of storm preparation. Some of the storms have been nasty. Fortunately, not as devastating as other portions of the country here in the US. But what the utility can do with this technology is send a signal to the water heater in advance of the storm and preheat GE Appliances water heater. The technology in GE Appliances water heater is pretty robust. And so that water heater can be heated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, immediately you'd say 160 degrees is going to burn somebody. What GE Appliances has done is they've now have a patented mixing valve on this water heater that produces hot water at 120 degrees with a plus or minus 1 degree variation. So from 119 degrees Fahrenheit to 121 degrees Fahrenheit. That's kind of the average temperature of most water heaters today. By preheating the water to 160 degrees, the utility can send a signal to turn the water heater off, the heating element. By doing that, it's an immediate reduction in power that has to be delivered to the home, and it's called demand side flexibility. Preheat to 160 degrees, turn the heating element off. And with the insulation that GE is included in this water heater, that water temperature will drop from 160 degrees to 120 degrees over a 6 to 7 hour time frame. So from a planning perspective for the utility, preheat in advance of a storm, preheat in advance of a really hot day when there's a peak demand on the grid, where rates are going to be the highest, where the charges for electricity are going to be the highest, and then take that load off the grid with the push of a button at a computer terminal. From our device to GE's device, aggregate savings. Two things beyond storm preparation. We can turn a water heater into a thermal storage device. As soon as the heating element is turned off, there is an immediate calculation of carbon savings. Homeowner is reducing their carbon footprint. Utility can actually capture that for carbon reduction. That's element one, thermal storage. The second is that device, that water heater, represents about 5 kilowatts of power. That's a lot inside a home. And so if it were just one home, not a big deal. But deploy this out to 100,000 homes, 10,000 homes, 50,000 homes, right? You're talking about megawatts of power that can come off the grid with the push of a button, depending on what's unfolding, while not disturbing the homeowner or inconveniencing them. So that's the type of technology we're working on. And we think the TRUSense Gateway creates a really compelling path for utilities to effectively have that type of granular control to better manage the grid, to prepare for storms, to reduce carbon footprint, and ultimately to reduce costs for consumers. To give you some order of magnitude, or maybe talking just timing, let me just sort of flush this out. I'm sorry, a little too fast there. We shared yesterday that as of March 13th, the TRUSense Fiber Gateway, which is the first version that we're bringing to market, has cleared through all of the tests for UL certification. The only thing that remains outstanding is the final paperwork and formal letter of certification from UL. As soon as we have that letter in hand, we are authorized to put the little white sticker on the outside of the plastic device here that has in black, bold letters U and L. It's a requirement for utilities to be able to deploy this device in the field, meaning on the side of someone's home in a meter socket that the utility owns. Crazy that it's a little sticker, but that's what it is. We're days away from receiving that letter based on updates this week from UL, and they're processing it as quickly as possible. But we're, ramping up sales, marketing, and production of the Fiber Gateway at this point to make sure that we are in the market and in alignment with our original schedules. The Ethernet Gateway, slight variation, and the Cellular Gateway are also in motion. There is still some certifications that have to be done on both of those two units, both of those two devices, but we expect both to be ready and available and in the market before the end of the first half of this year, so end of Q2, and we'll keep everybody apprised as we make progress on it. Deb, any questions?
Yeah, I guess just one thing that comes up quite often that I think is not well understood is with the rollout of the TRUSense Gateway, is there going to be cannibalization of legacy products? How does it fit within your suite of products?
Yeah, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So I understand the nature of the question, but this isn't a meter. This isn't replacing a meter. It's incremental. And so I'll give you a few very specific examples. We've been building this device with an advisory committee that comprises 8 utilities. 6 of those utilities are existing customers of Tantalus. 2 are not. They've never purchased anything from us, but they've been working for the last 2 years to help build, develop, test, and pilot this device that's in front of you on the screen. One of those utilities is the utility in Chattanooga that has today the largest fiber to the home deployment in the United States. They're delivering broadband services to over 100,000 homes within the city of Chattanooga. Long ago, over a decade ago, we partnered with EPB to develop a first generation fiber to the home connection. It didn't have this type of intelligence that we're building into this TRUSense Fiber Gateway. Over time, as the first generation product comes of age and sort of is time to be taken out of the field, right, EPB will migrate to the second generation. So there's not cannibalization there. It's actually an upgrade to existing infrastructure. That's one example. Some of our other existing customers are just starting to roll out fiber to homes to deliver broadband services. So this is incremental to what they've already purchased or are deploying from Tantalus as they get fiber to each home. It improves what they've already purchased and expands what they are doing. In some circumstances where we're seeing interest on the cellular gateway, the cellular version of this gateway from investor-owned utilities, is in those circumstances, we've never really pursued investor-owned utilities. It's not a limitation of technology, it's just kind of resources and the way we're modeled out our company. The cellular gateway solves a different type of problem for IOUs. In many circumstances, we're seeing investor-owned utilities that purchased a legacy metering infrastructure that they still intend to use for the next 5, 10, 15 years. The challenge that they have is that legacy metering infrastructure doesn't really capture power quality measurement to protect a transformer. It doesn't help a utility get advancements in their metering applications today. It doesn't help a utility get behind the meter for utility control of assets, the water heater, the inverter, the EV charger. And so in those circumstances where an investor-owned utility cannot upgrade their metering infrastructure, the cellular TRUSense Gateway solves a serious problem and allows them to modernize their grid. Now, at some point, does that mean an IOU doesn't purchase a smart meter from Tantalus? Maybe. That's a trade-off we're willing to make because it's bringing us into a new market that we've never really sold into. So I don't see a lot of cannibalization here, Deb. And I understand people are comparing the TRUSense Gateway to a meter. It is not an apples-to-apples comparison. It's a piece of fruit. One's an apple and one's a pineapple. I kind of prefer pineapples, and the TRUSense Gateway is that. Just tastes better.
Thanks.
Sorry, trying to have fun. Yeah. And I can kind of visually what that looks like 3D. The components of this is the fiber that the cellular obviously doesn't have the fiber connection coming out of it. But the really nice thing about this product, it retrofits into any existing meter socket, and it retrofits with any existing meter. And so at some point, I'll have to get a photograph of our own labs in Burnaby. We have a meter from Westinghouse, I think that dates back to 1957, plugged into our TRUSense Gateway. And believe it or not, there are still some meters like that in the United States deployed and in Canada. That Westinghouse 1957 meter now becomes a smart, intelligent, two-way meter with our technology in the TRUSense Gateway. The utility never has to touch that meter again unless they want to. So that's one of the really neat elements, and this is how it all comes together, fitting into existing infrastructure.
And talking about market size, why is the IOU an important category for you to be pursuing?
And I see a question that's come up, Deb. I maybe you can take a peek at that and we can address
Yeah.
it. Yeah, for the
Okay.
for investor-owned utilities, it's a different sales cycle and it's a different dynamic. They're regulated, right? You got to go through a state regulatory authority to get approval for utilities to get return on their investment or to get approval to deploy new technology. So it's a different type of model for us. Where it's attractive for Tantalus is scale. Order of magnitude. Investor-owned utilities, large ones, millions of meters. Small investor-owned utilities, hundreds of thousands of connected homes, electric meters. So in terms of gaining scale, the investor-owned utility for Tantalus, from a financial profile perspective, right, one investor-owned utility may represent 100% of what we've deployed in the field to 250 public power and electric cooperative utilities. So it's just order of magnitude. An example, we see rooftop solar panels being deployed at a faster rate in California and down in the southeast of the US, kind of southwest as well. There are portions up in the northeast where rooftop solar is gaining traction. More often than not, that rooftop solar is being adopted at a faster pace within the investor-owned utilities footprint. So, right, the fastest area is the San Francisco Bay Area, and then down in Southern California. Well, those areas are predominantly served by Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, Southern Cal Edison. There's a public power utility, LADWP, that's in the Los Angeles area. So there's some exceptions to that rule. But when you look at PG&E's footprint, they have almost 600,000 homes today that have rooftop solar installations. And from everything we can extrapolate from regulatory filings, right, when rooftop solar goes on a home, it starts to impact voltage. That voltage can then impact a transformer. And so for PG&E, they're having a really hard time keeping up with the integration of the rooftop solar panels at the residential level, integrating that into their grid at the expense of impacting transformers, where lead times have expanded and price points have quadrupled in some circumstances. So not all of those 600,000 rooftop solar installations are integrated into the grid today. In the state of California, if you're building a new home, by law, it has to have rooftop solar on it. So when we think about pursuing the investor-owned utilities, PG&E, they have a legacy metering infrastructure. They are very much focused on integrating distributed energy resources in mass. And so our product, right, can help a utility like PG&E start to integrate that rooftop solar and understand the impact that it has on their assets, and then proactively go out and address those issues at the asset level. So it's a combination of what's happening in the world, what's happening in the market, where solar, EVs, power walls are showing up more often than not in IOU footprint. This device solves a real problem there, and is first to market in that capacity. And then for us, scale. So it's really, sorry, long-winded answer. The easy answer is scale and applicability.
All right, we do have an audience question. So excitement is growing around TRUSense commercialization. How do you balance over or under sharing developments to the market so as not to show your hand too much to competitors, because this is a revolutionary product?
So I assume that question ties to our competition and how we don't show, how do we educate too much? One of the challenges of being a first mover with a product like this is we are educating. And no doubt, as we validate and we see market adoption, there will be organizations that chase. It happens in the world of technology. What we are, I'd say, focused on is creating a combination of protection. So we do have some provisional patents filed. Patent is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it provides protection. On the other hand, you're giving away drawings and information. And so the patent is only as good as your ability to defend. Large companies can outspend us on IP counsel. So we're not patenting and we're not sharing and showing our cards on the design in total. The second thing is, beyond components, someone could buy one of these, right? Just take one from a utility where a competitor has a good relationship and disassemble and figure out, okay, they're using this component and this component, and this is the layout and the design. A lot of the intelligence and a lot of the capabilities is embedded on our system on chip. And so it's not just the components and the circuitry, it's the software that's embedded on this device. That is 100% trade secret. It's an architecture, it's a library of protocols that we have embedded that we will never share in the market. And so to the extent other software development firms or other companies that have software and firmware capabilities catch up, so be it. We'll continue to make advancements as others are just trying to get into the market. So that's the second piece. And then the third is, not every utility is going to select us. We don't need all 2,900 utilities in the United States to buy this product. For us to double and triple the size of this company, right? We need a handful. Once this product goes to utility, much like our legacy capabilities in the metering side, we're creating an immediate barrier to entry for competition. And unless this device doesn't work, unless we really screw up as a company, which we have a pretty good track record of not doing, with 99% retention rate over the last 20 years of the utilities that have become customers of Tantalus, right? Once a utility adopts and starts to deploy the TRUSense Gateway, we've kind of created a barrier of entry for that utility. We've locked them in. So that's another way being first to market can help us. So a lot of our focus is getting this product out into the market and starting to get not only the advisory committee moving, but certainly as many as the first 25 utilities beyond the advisory committee that we're in active sales discussions with today. So I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I had another audience question about BC Hydro. So is the smart meter used by BC Hydro, who you work with, Itron, does it have some TRUSense components, or was that an earlier technology where TRUSense is a different revenue stream?
Yeah, we're not involved with BC Hydro. They are not a customer of Tantalus. BC Hydro years ago deployed an Itron legacy metering system called OpenWay. I'd say fairly successful in the Metro Vancouver area. From what we understand, it's been a real challenge as you get out and start migrating into the mountains and out towards Whistler, where BC Hydro still has a footprint. It's an RF-based communications technology, radio frequency-based technology. It has none of the TRUSense capabilities. It doesn't have anything related to Tantalus today. At some point, as BC Hydro starts to think about evolving to their next generation capabilities, the TRUSense Gateway may have applicability. And keep in mind, it's not, does the utility upgrade their meter or do they buy the TRUSense Gateway? Right? In some circumstances, I don't know if BC Hydro is actively evaluating upgrading their metering infrastructure. If they are, so be it. But if they aren't, they could purchase the TRUSense Gateway from Tantalus and all of a sudden start to modernize accordingly without having to touch that meter at all. And I don't think it's I wouldn't get into too many details about where the opportunity lies with BC Hydro, but we are seeing a large number of utilities that have the legacy Itron or legacy Landis+Gyr systems deployed. They have no flexibility from a regulatory perspective or from a CapEx perspective to upgrade those meters. The TRUSense Gateway, like I said, retrofits It is independent of the metering infrastructure, and can help the utility really accelerate grid modernization based on the use cases that we've outlined. So it's an alternative to a rip and replace. That's the way to summarize it.
I don't see any more audience questions, so you're back to dealing with my idiotic questions, Pete. Going back to the core business, like, do you still envision that being, I think traditionally it's been like a 10 to 20% kind of growth business. Do you foresee that continuing? And how do you see sort of the rollout in terms of revenue of the new product, the TRUSense?
The model of our business is, it has and continues to be, is convince a utility, that Tantalus is the right partner. Because these decisions are 12 to 15 years. And it's more than just being half pregnant, right? You're married with kids. And so, right, a lot of it is convincing utilities that we're the right team and the right partner. From there, we work hard to get utilities to deploy the devices in the field. It creates, and I get questions quite a bit. Why are you focused on hardware? Why not just focus on software? The answer is the hardware leads to the software side of our business, right? We're a hardware-enabled software company, if you really think about it. The device becomes not only the basis of accessing data that supports and delivers value through software, but it also creates barrier to entry for our competition. And so today, and you'll see this through our Q1 announcements, we are still winning utilities on all of the things that drove $42 million of revenue last year, none of which included the TRUSense, and very little of which included the TRUSync grid data management software, which is, we're just starting to bring to market as well. So we still see growth opportunity with our edge-based computing module. We'll still integrate that into our partners' meters. We're constantly thinking about how we expand metering partnerships and be a little bit less dependent on capacity constraints that surface quarter to quarter and year after year. And we highlighted that last year. We had about $1 million of orders that slipped out of the end of the year. That had immediate impact to our revenue profile, obviously, but it's a bit out of our control when we send a module to a meter factory and then the meter company has to integrate it. So we're constantly thinking about how we navigate around that dependency. But we still see great opportunity with the core competencies of Tantalus. And that core competency is a combination of hardware, 65% of revenue last year, software and services, 35% of revenue last year. And within that, $11.5 million of recurring revenue to scale. So I still think there's a robust opportunity within our core competencies today. We're not moving away from it. And so in my mind, when you look at, as an investor myself and a shareholder of Tantalus, right, I look at where we are today in the markets, and right, we're still kind of undervalued with just the core competency. It's kind of like a free option on the TRUSense Gateway as we bring that to market and really can drive accelerated growth. But the TRUSense Gateway, it follows this revenue model. It's not different. Convince the utility we're the right partner. Convince the utility that the TRUSense Gateway solves a problem and doesn't require them to rip and replace legacy infrastructure. And then get that device deployed. Start collecting over 1,000 data points on power quality per second for a 30-second window. 30,000 data points in 30 seconds, right? And how do we then drive software and analytics to monetize that data and deliver value to the utility? So I think we'll just start scratching the surface with the transformer analytics capabilities as we get the TRUSense Gateway into the market and as we get it deployed. And I think it will ultimately, over the 12 to 15 years that a TRUSense Gateway would be in the field, an opportunity for us, much like our edge computing module today, is drive incremental software and services revenue over an extended period of time. So it's in parallel to our current model, and I think it's just additive to what we're already doing. I hope that answered your question, Deb.
Yeah, that's great. You've talked a bit about transformers and the long lead times, and I apologize because maybe you've talked about it on this call, and I heard you quite a bit lately, Pete. But maybe we could talk a little bit about what are the issues with transformers? Why do utilities have the need to protect those assets? I.e., what happens if you don't protect a
Yeah.
transformer and
So
it
so
becomes
they're
lost?
so transformers are the critical asset in a utilities distribution grid that sit inside substations. They can sit on concrete pads that kind of look like big green metal boxes. In most places, some utilities paint them a different color. And then they're like this little, like it looks like I always say it looks like a big beer can. It's the pole top mounted transformer. What the transformer does is as utilities send electricity through a transmission grid and then from a transmission grid into substations and substations down wires that we see in our neighborhoods, right? They're consistently stepping down voltage so that still when my 14-year-old son sticks his finger in the electric socket, he doesn't die, he gets a shock. And somehow that's still funny to his friends. So more power to him. Not that smart, obviously. We'll have to work on that separately. But Fletch is still, I guess, yeah, got a bad sense of humor. But right, so how does the utility bring that power and that electricity down to a point where we can charge everything that we need to in our homes safely? As we see, example, a rooftop solar installation go onto a home, right? That's starting to deliver power back into the house. From a utilities perspective, it changes the voltage. So as maybe a layman's way of describing this is in your individual homes, maybe when you turn on the microwave and the toaster oven at the same time, the lights in your house may flicker, or you activate a washing machine and a dryer, right? Lights may flicker. That's a quick momentary outage. That momentary outage is caused because the voltage has changed as powers come on, powers come off. And so magnify that as you have a rooftop solar installation, a power wall. I now am the owner of an F-150 Lightning. And when I charge that, right, it's an immediate draw. I'm noticing it. The lights in my house are flickering as soon as I plug in that F-150 Lightning. It's not because it's poorly wired. It's because I'm drawing that much more power through the meter and the meter socket into my house. And so as we see changes in voltage, current has a play in that too, right? Those changes can stress transformers. And it sort of has a back channeling effect. So as I change behavior in my house, I have the washer and dryer running, I charge the electric vehicle, and oh, by the way, I'm cooking, right? The amount of power that's and during the summer, I got all my air conditioners running. The amount of power that the utility has to deliver to my house to make all of that work increases substantially. And as it increases, more power, right, is coming through the distribution lines. It comes through the pole top transformer. It's across the street from my house. As that pole top transformer, right, has more electricity flowing through it at a faster rate, that device starts to overheat. And what happens when a transformer or any product overheats? I'm sure you have some in your homes. My router consistently is overheating for whatever reason. It's probably my kids are watching too much Netflix. And along with my wife, who's like hooked on this latest Bachelor episode. It blows me away. But regardless, I'm watching hockey. She's watching The Bachelor streaming, and my kids are watching two other things, right? More data coming through that router. That router overheats. What happens at some point in time goes offline, right? Goes in protective relay mode. So transformers do the same thing. As they start to overheat, they're at risk of insulation breakdowns, oils overheating, and from there, fuse pops, outage, worst case, oils overheat, insulation breaks down, explosion, fire. So right, those are the scenarios, all because Pete Londa is consuming and his kids are consuming more power. So what the TRUSense Gateway does, assuming that Eversource, the utility that delivers power to my house, buys a TRUSense Gateway and installs it at my house, we'll see if we can make that happen. Right? We're capturing power quality data, waveform, harmonics, voltage, current, all kinds of different parameters. And based on anomalies, as voltage changes, we capture it. as current changes we capture, as harmonics start to change, as waveforms start to change, we can capture all that data and leverage that data through software and analytics to then help a utility pinpoint the transformer. What's happening at Pete's house is stressing the transformer. When transformers stress, voltage and current start to fluctuate. And so we can help the utility correlate location and change of power quality metrics. And from that, decipher, is that change in power quality metrics that the TRUSense Gateway is capturing indicative of transformer being an over voltage, under voltage, stressed, oversized, undersized, about to fail. And so proactively, right, transformers just don't all of a sudden, boom, right? It's over a period of time that they start to break down. And so by capturing that through our analytics capabilities, we can help the utilities pinpoint, hey, we got to roll a truck to where Pete Londa lives to figure out either A, is that transformer stressed, or B, is it undersized because now he has an F-150 Lightning that's charging. And oh, by the way, my neighbors have a Tesla, and I think one of them has a Volkswagen that's an EV, all on the same pole top transformer. The utility never envisioned that. So from data through the TRUSense Gateway, we can capture changes that are unfolding in real time and ultimately help the utilities from that data and analytics on that data pinpoint where do they have a pole top transformer that's at risk. The reason why that's really important is A, outages are expensive, fires are really bad, but look at some of the large transformer manufacturers. Some of them are the best performing stocks right now, right? Lead times have gone from weeks to years. Costs have gone from thousands of dollars to tens of thousands of dollars for a pole top transformer. So it's become really expensive and really complicated if one of those devices fails. So the TRUSense Gateway helps solve that problem. So I'm passionate about it, and hope that example makes sense, Deb.
Yeah, totally. I don't see any other audience questions, and we're coming up close to the hour, but there's one thing that I wanted to cover today, Pete, and I guess I should have discussed this with you first, but I'm just going to put you on the spot. So one of the challenges that you and I have encountered over the last 3 years since Tantalus went public is the float, and having low liquidity, and there's been some things that have changed this year surrounding that. And I thought maybe it would be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit about the improved liquidity that we've seen over the last little while and sort of the change in shareholder base that we've witnessed. And I was actually putting together some statistics for you this morning, and I was looking at average daily volume before February 22nd this year. And I believe the stock was trading about 10,000 shares a day. And then when I look after Feb 29th, we're averaging about 100,000 shares a day. So that's an incredible increase in liquidity in a short period of time. So I thought just for participants, they might be interested to hear some of the dynamics of what's changed. And I guess I shouldn't forget about the share price appreciation factor as well.
So we'll freestyle a little bit here. Always dangerous, Deb, especially when we're recorded on YouTube, but let's see what happens. Mike Grandis, our general counsel, will clean it up after the fact. So two things. It was no secret that when we went public, we had a cap table that was comprised of investors as a private company. Some of those investors were venture capital firms. And while one of the largest shareholders of the company is a venture capital firm out of California, that doesn't really have a time horizon. Our position, I believe, sits in their partners fund, so it doesn't have an expiration date. We had a almost 9% owner in Tantalus from an acquisition we made in 2016. And within that shareholder base, we gave stock to that company. It was called Energate. Within that shareholder base, there was a venture capital firm out of Montreal that was approaching an expiration date on their fund. And they had the opportunity, I think, to extend for 1 or 2 years beyond that. And so as they went through that 1 to 2 year period of time, they were, I think, pretty active trying to find a home for almost 10% or 9% of the company. And I think that had a drag on the stock. Certainly we found, I think, interest, but the VC firm, I don't think really made it it wasn't quiet about trying to find liquidity. And so in the absence of having one investor take them all out at one time, I think that was a drag on the stock, and a lot of investors waiting to ultimately build so that you're not buying stock and then having someone else sell on top. So that block of stock was processed through some of the investment banks that provide coverage for us today. And I think as that cleared, it led to, I think, a wave of interest of investors, institutional and retail, that had been tracking us for some time. And I have this slide up because we've been communicating what we think the TRUSense Gateway means for the company. And so while it was not something we were involved in, but the amount of interest that came in through the banks led to a second block of stock. So almost 20%, a little less than that, 18, 19% of the capitalization of the company traded within 5 days, 5 trading sessions in February. And I think that just brought in a new wave of investors, some that had been sitting on the sidelines as they've been tracking our progress towards not only financial performance, but also bringing the TRUSense Gateway to market. And so I think as that's freed up, we've seen just more float without diluting our shareholders. Sometimes better to be lucky than smart. And because of that, we've seen an increased volume. That's my perspective of it. I'm sure the investment banks that were involved in those block trades would be able to provide more perspective. And I think as we get closer, as we shared yesterday on our earnings call, to the UL certification of the TRUSense Fiber Gateway and what that means for the advisory committee members that represent for us almost $150 million of incremental opportunity over the next 5, 7, 8 years, whatever the time frame is, right? I think that becomes more tangible. And certainly, we would have liked to seen higher growth year over year, personally, 2023, but we had a record year. And despite investing $5 million last year in getting the TRUSense Gateway closer to market, we were EBITDA neutral, and we fortified and protected our balance sheet without diluting shareholders. So I think other shareholders have taken note of that. That's my perspective. And so as a result, I hope we continue to see increased interest and increased demand for the stock and increased liquidity. It's key for us.
You referenced the $5 million investment last year, and I believe it was about the same in 2022 into TRUSense Development. What's going to be the ongoing R&D for that product? Like, what can investors think of on an annual basis? Because obviously you're going to have to keep innovating and creating new products around it. So we still have spend in the first 6 months of this year. We communicated that yesterday. And so our expectation is, while we had 3 consecutive quarters of positive EBITDA, Q2, Q3, and Q4, combination of R&D and then marketing. Couple of huge trade shows in Q1, our annual users conference in Q2. So we'll have some dollar spend and investment in the company that'll impact near-term EBITDA in the first half of this year. Within the $5 million, and we kind of broke this out a little bit on yesterday's earnings call through George's comments, about $3.5 million of that, I'm estimating, ballparking, is internal costs. It's headcount. It's infrastructure that we purchase and expense to get the TRUSense Gateway commercialized. We'll continue to retain our engineering team that'll not only continue to iterate and improve, much like the iPhone from version 1 to 2 and 3 and 4, right? We'll consistently iterate and improve the integrity and the functionality of the TRUSense Gateway. So, that's not money or dollar spend that goes away. From a commercialization perspective, about $1.5 million spent last year was on prototyping and certification processes, which are expensive, external consultants and contractors to help accelerate the cellular, the Ethernet, and the fiber gateways on top of our engineering team. That's the variable cost. That as we get all 3 versions commercialized, that $1.5 million from an R&D spend last year starts to dissipate through this year. So it won't be a full $1.5 million external. And then as all 3 versions are commercialized and in the market, our internal team will maintain the technology. So that's sort of ballpark order of magnitude. If we pro forma it out
You take away those variable expenses, it's a dollar for dollar drop to EBITDA. With that in mind, we got a first mover advantage into the first question on how do we prepare for competition. The answer is we got to get the marketing right on this, in addition to getting the technology right. So we'll lean forward a little bit as we start to see cash flow from revenue from the TRUSense Gateway, and we'll start marketing to the IOUs, something that we haven't done previously. Not at the magnitude of $1.5 million, but some of those dollars will go into sales and marketing in the near term.
Okay. That's it for me, Pete. I don't see any audience questions. Is there anything you wanted to touch on today that we didn't cover?
Deb, thanks for hosting. I still am. I got a one-day blackout here, or one day where I'm not in blackout. I'm a shareholder of this company. I'm an investor in this company. I think Tantalus is extremely well positioned, not only to continue to scale what we've done and continue to gain market share in the technology that we have available today. The TRUSense Gateway it's an extremely compelling opportunity. And I think Tantalus, as a result, is really well positioned to become a market leader within the grid modernization effort. So we're excited about 2024. We'll be excited about some of the forthcoming news on both UL certification and then initial utilities that have or will be selecting the TRUSense Gateway as their path forward. We'll look forward to being able to provide an update in mid-May as we release our Q1 financials.
Sounds like you've got a busy couple months ahead of you.
So do you, Deb. Yeah, but I think thanks for hosting, and thanks for the questions.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks everyone for participating. Hope everyone has a nice Easter and a nice break. And yeah, if anyone has any follow-up questions or would like a one-on-one with Peter, please let me know. We can get that arranged. And I thought there was a question, but there was someone just giving us praise, Pete. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Doing our best.
All right, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.